the only people who spoke up about having a problem with the question being asked were white people who were saying that I was racist for bringing up the subject of race. Hi everybody, and welcome back to an invisible and invisible illness awareness project. As promised, I wanted to get into the conversation that kind of motivated me to start this whole series on medical racism. I wouldn't say that it hadn't crossed my mind before, but this was definitely a catalyst in that process that pushed me to go ahead and start doing it now. I do want to share this with you guys, but I don't want to start any drama, so I'm not going to be mentioning specifically which groups were involved or names of anybody involved. If you were involved, then you probably know who and what I'm talking about, but the point of this video is more to illustrate that the problem exists than to call out any particular person, because this could have happened in any group, and I don't see it as an issue with individual people as much as an issue with all of the people who think this way, whether they commented or not. And like I said, instead of like these particular people, it could have been different people in different groups, but the conversation just wasn't had in that group. So I think it's more important to look at the situation on the whole and use this as an example that can be applied to a lot of different communities. So first of all, I'm in this group for Black patients with this one illness, and somebody came and posted in this group that she'd gotten into sort of a debate on Twitter. She said, "Is it just me, or is a lot of activism very white feminist? I don't know if it's just the spaces I'm in or what, but it looks like a lot of the work being done is for white women. Not all of it, but like most of what pops up, at least in my circles, and it's had me frustrated lately. I'm not just seeing nothing, right? I'd love to hear your thoughts and perspective." This is how I got involved in this conversation with this particular person, who then directed me to this conversation that was happening on Twitter. And I think this is a conversation that has been had many times. Like, this particular person is, very passionate about calling this stuff out. But this was like sort of the first conversation that I was even aware of. Hot take: a lot of the progress and activism in the community is based on white feminism, and it's for middle class, cis, straight white women only. That post definitely got a lot of response, but it took me some time to get around to reading it because I wasn't even on Twitter at all. I actually signed up on Twitter so that I could delve into this whole conversation and see what was going on there. But just after seeing sort of like a preview of this conversation and discussing it with this person, and also conversations about trying to get more members into our group, and sort of the question of where are the Black people with it? Are they in the main group and they just don't know about this smaller group, or are they not in the Facebook groups at all, and why not? So to answer at least one of those questions, I wanted to do a poll in this group to find out how many minorities we had. And I didn't want to just say, hey, we have this group for Black people, because you get a lot of ugly comments where people are like, people are upset that they can't be a part of that group, and like, why can't everybody be in the group, or why can't you say whatever you need to say in this main group, or it's racist to have a group for minorities, all that mess I wanted to avoid. So I thought, instead, I'm just gonna do a poll, see how people answer, and based on the answers, I can invite the people who belong in this group to join. So first of all, I was trying to construct this poll of racial and ethnic groups on a global level, which is very difficult because the US does a lot of race polling, but it's only based on the major racial ethnic groups that are in the US, or that at least are recognized in the US. So I put a lot of thought into trying to find a way to make it more international, because the US groups just do not apply at all to other places that I've lived, and I wanted this to be relevant to everybody. So what I came up with was European or of European descent, Asian or of Asian descent, Latin American or of Latin American descent, Native Indigenous or of Native Indigenous descent, Sub-Saharan African or of Sub-Saharan African descent, Middle Eastern North African or of Middle Eastern North African descent, Pacific Islander or of Pacific Islander descent. And I left it open so that other people could add categories if they felt that they weren't included, but I did want to still keep it as broad as possible and not get too specific. I did get some people nitpicking about the terminology, but I was more than open to it. It started a very interesting conversation with a lot of group members, which was perfectly constructive, not at all. There was no sense of hostility to it. There were a couple people who wanted to know why I was asking. I said I don't want to say yet, and they were fine with it. After thinking it over, I realized this wasn't quite what I wanted to ask, so I decided to reconstruct the poll. I did a lot of searching to see if there are more official words to describe different skin tones, and I came across the Fitzpatrick scale, which classifies you into one of 6 different skin tones based on how you tan and burn and your skin tone when you're not out in the sun. But instead of putting just types 1 to 6, I wanted to come up with a word to name each of them, and a lot of times you have words like olive and then like chocolate, caramel, stuff like that, but I didn't want to only use food words for the darker end of the spectrum. But if you avoid the food words, then for the darker end of the spectrum, it's usually like light brown, medium brown, dark brown. And I also didn't want to use just like all these different words for brown when the lighter end of the spectrum has individual words for every skin tone. So I put a lot of thought into it, and I ended up coming up with food words to describe all 6 of them. And I was very happy with myself and posted this poll, but unfortunately I didn't save it, so I don't even remember exactly what words I used. It's gone. I got screenshots of the comments, but unfortunately not the poll itself. Right after I posted, I already got a comment saying, what's the purpose of this? It seems racist to me. And then someone else jumped in and said, or at a minimum intrusive and unnecessary. And I'm thinking, how is it racist just to ask what race you are? Like, I'm just asking the question. I didn't make a comment on race. So what's the problem? So to avoid any sort of like hostility or debate, I decided to delete that poll, repost it, and not allow any comments. I just wanted people to answer the poll, and I didn't want me saying why I was doing it to influence the response I got in any way. Poll was taken down. I think because several group members were upset about it, they probably went to the admins about it, and the admins said they wouldn't allow the poll if they didn't know why I was asking. I did make another post saying, funny how if the subject of race is even mentioned here, it's automatically assumed to be racist. It's really telling that we can't even have a conversation without being censored. That says a lot about the people trying to shut down the discussion. That for me was the moment where I really realized there's definitely a problem here. Like that was, I guess, the first time that I had brought it up and really encountered it firsthand. Yeah, I had comments on that post saying because race is irrelevant when it comes to the sickness, unless you have a citation for a valid scientific study indicating race is a factor, all you have is your own theory and some bizarre axe to grind. Race is irrelevant to support. Again, I don't understand how this comes across as me having an axe to grind, and how you can say that race would be irrelevant. First of all, it's not, and second of all, if we didn't have studies proving that it was relevant, then how do you expect us to get that information if we can't even have the conversation? But just for the record, we do. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and watch the last 3 videos. Yeah, someone else commented, racism, I feel like I'm dying, do you think I give a shit? Well, I guess you don't have to give a shit if you're not affected by racism, but do you realize that other patients also feel like they're dying and they have to deal with racism on top of that? Yeah, someone else said these polls are intrusive and have no scientific value. It says a lot about you that you don't see the problem. Fortunately, somebody finally did come along and said race and ethnicity can be completely relevant in some diseases, so it's not a stand-in for discrimination. To which someone replied, the severity or symptoms were not mentioned in the poll, just skin color, and hard to figure out the relevance. Okay, well, maybe if you had given me the chance, you know, we would have gotten to that, but we don't really have to bring severity or symptoms into it because I'm posting in a group for this illness. So suffice it to say, if there are people in this group of different races that have this illness, that already makes it relevant. You know, I don't have to ask, do you have this illness? Because if you didn't, you wouldn't be in the group to begin with. And having it is on topic. Yeah, and finding out how many people of different races have this illness, or how many people of different races who have this illness are present in this group, is relevant to the illness without even getting into symptoms and severity. Symptoms and severity would be, you know, taking it a step further, but that's not necessary. You know, it's still not off topic just because I didn't get more in depth with the first post. What I found really telling was that there were white people willing to have the conversation and have this sort of discussion about the racial ethnic categories, and who defended the fact that race is relevant and didn't have a problem with me not explaining why I was asking up front. And there were also some people of color in there too, who asked why I was asking, and I said I don't want to say yet, and they were perfectly fine with that. But the only people who spoke up about having a problem with the question being asked were white people who were saying that I was racist for bringing up the subject of race without even saying anything about it. And that to me is highly problematic, because we should be able to at least discuss it. And depending on where you stand and what comes up in that conversation, you can make a judgment if someone is racist or not. But just mentioning it is not a lot of times you get these comments, people saying, I don't see color, and you know, it shouldn't make a difference, and blah blah blah. Well, guess what? In a perfect world, yes, you're right. But in the world we live in, it does make a difference. People do see it. We're not blind. So you can't just ignore it, and not discussing it doesn't make it go away. You need to discuss the problem that already exists if you want to address it, and if you want any chance of improving the situation. And then if we eventually get to the point where there really is no difference and everybody is treated the same, and you know, aside from treatment, the epigenetic trauma that people have is the same, because so many generations have passed that there's no longer any racial disparities there, then we can stop talking about it. But right now, as long as the problem still exists, it needs to be discussed. Okay, so this has gone on a bit longer than I'd anticipated, so I am going to go ahead and split this into 2 videos. This is the Facebook side, and next time I will get into the Twitter side. So stay tuned for that next week, and I will see you guys then.